Gentlemen, I think it's relatively safe to say that most of your activities involve playing defense. I mean, obviously, some of the intelligence gathering can be used in offensive capabilities, but by and large, what you're trying to do in Department of Homeland Security, FBI, and the Counterterrorism Center is we're playing defense. Now, it's possible you can win a football game playing defense if you get real lucky, but if you're really going to win the game, you got to go on offense. Director Rasmussen, one of the things I want to talk about, the fact that we've had 2 years where the caliphate continues to exist, and yeah, we have reduced their territory, but according to your testimony and Director Brennan, we haven't reduced their capability. The diaspora has already begun. You know, we're poking a hive, we're doing some damage to it, but the killer bees are leaving the hive, they're setting up new hives. Director Rasmussen, can you talk about what you know of in terms of the training? We've talked about inspired lone wolves. Now we're talking about potentially directed wolf packs, whether it's in Brussels or Istanbul airports. I've certainly heard stories of children in the caliphate being trained to do savagery. And by the way, I like your description, Director Comey, savages, barbarians. So Director Comey, or Director Rasmussen, can you just talk about what you know in terms of the effectiveness of their training, both in the caliphate and as long as they continue to exist using social media? I think we just witnessed that in New York and New Jersey as well as the pressure cooker bombs. I mean, these things that are online. Just talk a little bit about that for me.
To your question, Mr. Chairman, there was a period, I would certainly argue, at the peak of the caliphate's geographical expanse when there was certainly a greater share of territory was available for ISIL to conduct this kind of recruitment and training activity. The flow of foreign fighters that Director Comey referred to was at its peak approximately a year or 18 months ago. And at that time, we were certainly concerned about the physical space that ISIL owned and the ability of the group to use that physical space to collect these foreign fighters, to train, to deploy, to equip, and to create this cadre of potential terrorists who could be deployed back out to locations around Western Europe and indeed around the globe. That's why the shrinkage of that physical caliphate has been such a high first-order priority of our strategy to defeat ISIL. But we've acknowledged all along, I think, or at least as an intelligence matter, felt all along that there was going to be a lag between the time where we achieved territorial success on the battlefield and the time at which we could actually succeed in constraining ISIL's ability to carry out attacks overseas. Because much of that infrastructure that was set into motion or put into place is going to have to be hunted down and destroyed systematically. It's not simply a matter of taking territory or winning a battle in a place like Mosul or Raqqa. So from an intelligence perspective, it's not that we're at all aiming to minimize the importance of the territorial success that the coalition has had and the shrinkage of the caliphate. Not by any means whatsoever. In fact, destroying the physical manifestation of the caliphate is also a precondition for undermining the ISIL narrative, for getting at and proving the lie behind ISIL's social media outreach to try to motivate people in the ways that Secretary Johnson and Director Comey talked about. So I think of it in terms of a timeline where the effects we're looking to see are simply going to be delayed or lag behind the physical progress on the battlefield. It's not surprising. It puts us in a period of sustained vulnerability that I don't think any of us are comfortable with, but I think it's a reality.
Don't you agree if we're here a year or two from now and they still control territory, they still have Raqqa, we'll probably be making the same statement that we have not reduced their global reach, their terrorist capability, because they've set up, whether it's Libya or some of these other affiliates. I mean, they have to be destroyed. We can't just nibble around the edges here.
If we are sitting here a year from today, I hope we are in a position to say that we have put considerably more pressure on that component of ISIL that focuses on external operations, on deploying these operatives overseas, that we will have done a great deal more work by that time a year from now to rip apart that network and render it less capable. Will we be at the end of that effort? I don't know that I can predict that.
To talk a little bit about the diaspora that I think is already occurring, certainly I'm concerned about potentially ISIL operatives coming into the United States. But when I take a look at the level of risk, whether it's through refugees, whether it's through the visa waiver program, or through an incredibly porous southern border, I would say I'm more concerned about our porous border. And Secretary Johnson, I just want to talk a little bit about the latest stats on unaccompanied children and family units. In 2014, we held hearings, and in the news media we were talking about this surge, this humanitarian crisis. In 2014, there were 68,000 unaccompanied children that crossed the border. So far in 2016, we're up to 54,000. In terms of family units, back in 2014, there were about 68,000 family units. We're already at 68,000 with a month to go. So we've certainly gotten more efficient at processing and dispersing, apprehending, processing, and dispersing. Let's face it, a lot of them just turn themselves in. My concern is because we have not stopped the flow or reduced the flow, because we still have enormous incentives for people to come into this country. We haven't succeeded in doing that. I'm concerned about the diversion of resources on the border, having to take care of what remains, I think, humanitarian crisis. Again, hats off to your agencies, the agencies. We've gotten better at handling it, but we haven't stopped the flow. Can you just kind of talk about the concern you have of the southern border being diverted, still working on these problems?
Yes, sir. The underlying push conditions in Central America still exist. The poverty and the violence in Central America still exist. FY15, the numbers of those apprehended on the southern border went down considerably. FY14, the total number was about 479. FY15, about 331. My projection for FY16 is that we'll come in at around 407, 408,000 apprehended on the southern border. That's a fraction of what it used to be, but it's still too high. And you're correct, Chairman, in that we've gotten better at processing the UACs in particular on the front end. We've added resources, but the push factors still exist. I am concerned about what we refer to as the special interest alien that comes from the other hemisphere that turns up on our southern border. We don't see this very often. It's a very small percentage of those who are apprehended on our southern border who are coming from the Middle East region. We now have in place systems to almost immediately investigate that person when we apprehend him. I have put in place a working group within my department over the last several months to work with the law enforcement components of other governments in Central and South America to interdict these people before they get to our border and to share intelligence about what we're seeing. The smuggling organizations that focus on migrants from the Middle East are a relatively limited number. And so what we're doing and what I want to do more of is focus our law enforcement efforts on cooperating with the law enforcement of agencies of Central and South American governments to break these organizations up. You began your question by referring to migrants from the other hemisphere, and I think that that's a very legitimate concern, and we're focused on it.